As someone who suffers from quite a few different allergies, I was intrigued to put the Dyson Formaldehyde Purifier through its paces. Now, this thing doesn't come cheap. It costs £600 in the UK, $750 in the US. Even if you take the formaldehyde technology out of the equation, it's still £550 in the UK and $650 in the US. In this review, I'm going to be seeing if it's actually worth its price tag, be it from a purifying sort of standpoint of view, in other words, for killing, let's say, the bad pollutants within a household environment, and also in terms of it actually delivering in terms of an air, in terms of being a fan. And that is fundamentally what I would think that it is. And a lot of people coming to this review might think, well, it's just a Dyson fan rather than just a purifier and a fan. And here I'll be comparing it to one of the regular fans that you can find in a supermarket. It costs around £20 to £30 in the UK or dollars in the US, and I'm sure you can find some alternatives out there which are even cheaper. But in this review, I'll be looking at how much air can it push and how silent can it get. Now, before jumping into this independent review, if you do like the content that you see at the end of the review, make sure you subscribe and hit that bell notification. It'd be greatly appreciated. So to kick things off, let's talk about its design, and here I have to talk about its form factor because you might want to place this in a room and you'll be intrigued to know how much space does it take. Well, it measures around 77 centimeters in terms of height, and it's got roughly 23 centimeters in terms of diameter. Now, the cable that comes pre-attached into it, and you can't remove it by the way, comes at 1.9 meters in terms of length. Some people might actually want a longer length, but this is something you should be mindful of, so you might need an extension cord depending in terms of the setup that you have. Now, aside from its dimensions, of course, it is a very stylish piece of technology. It has Dyson's multiplier technology. In other words, it has this kind of ring that goes around and therefore produces air from either side. It hasn't got that traditional fan type of design. Some might say it's safer, but well, traditional fans, if you have it covered, are going to be equally safe as well. I should say here, in terms of the noise, it does have a regular noise. It doesn't seem to have like a bearing noise or anything like that that you can realize. Now, when in terms of bearing, this does also have an oscillation feature, and here it means that it can pivot around to around 350 degrees. Now, this is quite nice because it can cool an entire room and provide everyone in the room equal amount of air, but it also can be adjusted via the remote control. Now, there is a remote control that comes included in the package, as you might expect. It's a very lightweight device and it's very fitting in terms of design because it's got this kind of gold brushed look, which also fits with the formaldehyde range. Of course, if you don't have that formaldehyde range, then it will come in a different color and will be appropriately painted. Now, the remote itself is very easy to use and also can be placed at the top of the device when not in use. It's got a kind of magnetic type of mechanism that sits at the top and therefore means that, well, you don't have to lose your remote if you're not going to be using it. Of course, most people, if they're going to be using the fan from afar, will want the remote on them, and in this respect you can place it on your desk and it doesn't look too bad because it's actually quite a stylish little device. Now, elsewhere on the device itself there's an on and off button as well, so if you were to lose the remote for some reason and you wanted just to switch it on and off when you're passing by, then you can do so, which can be quite handy if you, let's say, place it next to a bed and you just reach over and press that on and off button. And then you've got a LCD display as well. Now, the LCD display can be dimmed if you run it in night mode, but other than that you can't adjust the brightness, not as far as I can tell. Now, the LCD does provide some information in terms of the air quality via graph, and it's quite fascinating to see it move, and we'll talk about this further down in terms of its performance, specifically in terms of purifying. But what is better in this domain is the fact that you've also got the Dyson app. Now, through the Dyson app you've got a few different controls. For example, you can see how the air quality is in your area, so that is the outdoor air quality, by looking at the top of the app. If you were to swipe down, then you can suddenly see the indoor air quality, and given the formaldehyde range you've got a whole degree of different graphs to look through, and this can be quite fascinating for geeks out there or for those people who are curious to see how the indoor air quality is being affected. Just bear in mind that the regular graph, the main air quality index, does kind of take into account all these different levels that you're going to have, and therefore gives you kind of an average and gives you an indication of how the indoor air quality is in comparison to, well, how it should be, or the sort of level that it should be, at least according to Dyson. Now, when you go through the app, you do have the ability to connect over to a Wi-Fi network, and you'll want to do this if you want to control your fan from afar. And in this respect, I have no problems connecting over to my mesh network, which runs on 2.4 and 5 gigahertz frequency bands. If I'm not mistaken, the fan only runs on 2.4 gigahertz, so it's just something to be mindful of, but I have no different SSIDs, differences between the 2.4 and 5 gigahertz bands, and yet the fan had no problems connecting up to my network. Also, connecting up to your network is going to be important for your firmware updates if they come in terms of the future. And also here you can also order filters if you need them. Now here you've got an active monitoring system which will give you an indication of when you need to change your filters, or indeed you can use it on a more manual process and therefore adjust, well, change the fans when needs be, when, well, the fan gets a little bit older. Now, as I did mention, in terms of connecting up to the app via Wi-Fi, it's going to be handy because you have also got controls that you can access of the fan. They work in real time. I had no issues whatsoever, and in my opinion it's a good alternative to the small little remote control, be it if you're going to lose it or if you want something that's just handy in your pocket, which is often such as your smartphone. The Dyson app over here is ready for you to use and allows you to control your fan from afar. So with that out of the way, let's get on to the most important part, the performance. Now, I have to say I don't have laboratory equipment or I'm a scientist or anything like that, but I am a regular consumer and I did try and do a variety of different tests and of course use myself as a test dummy, so to speak. Now, first off, in terms of killing certain pollutants in the air, I will say that if you were to spray some, let's say, deodorant, or in this case I had some odor remover for my shoes next to the purifier, it will pick it up within a few seconds and notice a different quality of air, and therefore will try and purify that air and reduce the impact of that, which is pretty cool to see on a real-time basis. What I was actually quite fascinated about is when my wife and I were cooking, we had the purifier placed in 2 different rooms at 2 separate times. And here it even picked up that there were some pollutants in the air, and this was from slightly burning chicken, that was my bad by the way, and even certain vegetables that were being cooked. It would pick up that there were these fumes that were being emitted, and even though we had our extractor fan, and even the fact that the kitchen is in a different room than our living room and the office respectively, it would still pick up that there was a slight quality difference of air, something that I didn't even notice, but I could slightly smell the cooking that was taking place. So this was really fascinating, and even seeing it go to its red line or its purple line even at some points was quite, well, hilarious in some respects, because it just showed how much the chicken had burnt in this respect. But anyway, what I did also find fascinating is that when I did have the purifier placed in a room and there was some gardeners outside just doing their gardening with their petrol or diesel machines, that the purifier didn't quite pick up that sort of fumes that I could really smell in the room. And I found this fascinating. I'm not sure if it was because the machines that we're using are not emitting a pollutant that the purifier could pick up, or was the fact that the purifier just didn't really work in this domain. I'm not really sure, but it's certainly something I wanted to comment on and something I felt that was important to highlight in this review. Now, elsewhere, I was also intrigued to see how it would do with my allergies. Now, I've got an allergy to pollen, so hay fever, house dust mites, which is just regular dust particles, and also cat and dog hair, which might be a little bit random for this review, but I just thought to point it out anyway. Now, what I find is that in the summer months, specifically given the time of recording is sometimes a little bit warmer in the UK, I do realise that I start sneezing a lot more, and that's just generally because of my hay fever. It's nothing severe, I don't have severe hay fever, but I just noticed that I sneeze every now and then in the office. Now, when I did have the Dyson Purifier running, I actually found myself not sneezing as much, and I found that this might be potentially coincidental, and it might have been placebo even. So I even removed the fan from the office and gave it to my wife and put it in a completely different room, and I suddenly realised realized that I was starting to sneeze again. So it clearly was doing something, and it was pretty cool that it was reducing my allergy reactions to pollen. And again, I'm not a heavy allergy sufferer or someone who has severe reactions. I mean, I do have reactions on my skins from time to time with cat and dog hair, but when it comes to house dust mites and for pollen, it's not as severe. Now, the reason I'm pointing this out is because if you have severe allergies, specifically such as hay fever, then the purifier will be a great addition to your household, purely because, well, it will be giving you less impact. Now, you might give the counter argument, well, if you have a purifying technology within the household, suddenly as soon as you step out, what happens then? Well, clearly the purifier doesn't work when you're out and about, but if it's somewhere you want to be comfortable, in other words when you want to be at home, then the purifier might be a good solution for you. I actually spoke to one person completely randomly who was on the street, and they actually said that they had severe eczema on their hands, and when they were at home they realized that the reaction would be severely reduced as a result of using Dyson's purifiers. So of course, right now it's very much positive, the Dyson fan is doing its job, but what about in terms of just a regular fan design? Does it do a good job or not in this domain? Well, here I put it through its paces against the Dyson Pure Me, the small little personal fan, and also the regular traditional fan that many will be accustomed to. Now, I should point out the formaldehyde, unlike the other two fans, can also provide a heating function. It gets to around 35 degrees centigrade as well, so it can provide heat in a room as well, other than being, of course, a purifier too. But looking at it in terms of a regular fan, in other words, just providing cool air, here it's pretty much on a level playing field. Again, take away its purifying technology of the PureCool and the formaldehyde, and suddenly here we've just got a regular fan. Now, first off, I was able to produce a somewhat more objective sort of test. I put a sound meter that was roughly 30 to 60 centimeters away from the fan at an angle as well. Therefore, it was not being affected by the amount of wind that was being shoved through the microphone. So here I found that the regular tower fan does worse in terms of its level 1 and level 2 mode, but in terms of its maximum level 3 mode, the Dyson fans do a worse job at being louder fans respectively. And you can see over here from the graph for yourself as to how the level increments change between the fans. Now, again, bear in mind that the regular fan that you can buy in a supermarket has 3 different levels, at least the one that I had, and the Dyson fans have 10 level of increment differences. What I will say is that between level 1 to level 5, it's pretty silent. But between level 6 to level 10 is where the Dyson fans become a little bit louder. Specifically the PureCool, it becomes a little bit more accentuated and therefore can be heard a little bit higher in terms of the higher pitch noise that it has. Now, the only thing worth bearing in mind with the sound chart is the fact that it doesn't equate for the amount of air each fan can push out. Now, I should mention that the regular cheapo fan that you can find has 3 different increments of speed changes, at least the fan that I had. And the Dyson fans, both of which have 10 different increment levels. So here, arguably, if you want something that has very little air output, but it's just doing its job and is very silent in the background, then the Dyson fans can produce that, whereas the regular El Cheapo fan, at least the one that I had, wasn't able to do that because at level 1 mode it was producing much more noise, as you might have noticed. However, as a fan goes in terms of producing air, the cheapo fan in level 1 mode produced more air than the Dyson fan was able to do in level 6 or level 7 mode. Let alone when we got to level 2 mode on the El Cheapo fan, or even level 3 mode, here the Dyson fans simply just couldn't keep up. If I was at around 2 meters distance away from any of the fans, I could barely feel the Dyson fan, the formaldehyde fan that is, at level 10, versus the regular El Cheapo fan on level 1 or level 2 or level 3, and here I could feel it a lot more in terms of the amount of air that was being shoved my way. What I'm trying to say over here is that the amount of air these Dyson fans can push out is not that impressive, and to the point where if you want to have a lot of air that's being constantly circulated in a room and something that you can actually feel, you're going to have to run the fans at a higher fan speed, and as such means that the Dyson fans are going to be louder than the much cheaper fans. Then here you're going to find that the Dyson fans just simply can't keep up with something that costs a lot cheaper than what they are producing. And so this all really leads me on to my verdict. If you're looking for a regular fan, in other words something that can just produce air and is relatively silent, then you should be looking elsewhere from these Dyson solutions, because, well, a regular El Cheapo fan will give you more air and will be a little bit more silent for the amount of air that they produce, so all relatively speaking. But the reason you'd be buying the Dyson Formaldehyde tower fan wouldn't be just for it producing air, other than it having its app and the remote, and also the fact that you can also monitor the air quality. It's of course the fact that it is a purifier, and a very stylish one at that as well. In this respect, if you're looking for a stylish purifier that also has hot and cool functions, then this is arguably one of the best on the market. Is it worth its price tag? Well, that's for you to decide. Alright, I've been Totally Dubbed. Don't forget to subscribe and of course like and favorite and share, as it very much be appreciated, and take care of yourselves. Bye bye.